The wind came hard out of the west that morning, carrying grit and old grudges, rattling the loose sign above the mercantile and whispering trouble into every hitching post. Folks said the town of Red Willow could smell a reckoning before it showed its face, and when she stepped off the stage, with her hat pulled low and her spine straight as a fence rail, every man on Main Street felt it in his bones. She had that look, the kind that said she had buried something back where she came from and wasn't done digging yet. Her boots hit the dirt with purpose, and the driver clicked his tongue like he wanted no part of what followed. Somewhere, a screen door slammed, and a dog quit barking, as if the whole town leaned in to watch her arrive. Her name was Clara Mae Holloway, though most folks would not learn it that day. She carried a single valise, and a scar just under her jaw that caught the sun when she turned her head. Red Willow had seen women before, but not many who walked like they dared the land itself to say something back. She paused in the street, eyes lifting to the low hills beyond town, remembering a promise made in a softer place, remembering how promises could rot when left too long in the dark. The sheriff watched from the shade, thumb hooked in his belt, thinking she looked like trouble wrapped in calico, and he was not wrong. Not by half. The first time she heard his name was in a murmur near the saloon doors, spoken low and quick like a prayer that might turn on you if said too loud. Cole Ransom, a man built out of dust and iron, a man who rode in like weather and left scars on the land. They said he owned half the valley by deed and the other half by fear. Clara took that in without blinking. Fear was an old companion of hers, one she knew how to keep at arm's length. She adjusted her grip on the valise and headed for the boarding house, unaware that every step carried her closer to the man who would test every hard one. Certainty she owned that night. The saloon breathed smoke and sweat, lantern light cutting through it in honeyed bands. Cole Ransom stood at the bar with his back half turned, long coat hanging loose, hat shadowing his eyes. He listened more than he spoke, a habit born of survival. When he laughed it was brief and sharp, like flint struck wrong. He felt the change in the room before he saw her, a shift, a tightening. He turned, and there she was across the floor, chin lifted, gaze steady. Something old and fierce flickered between them, recognition without memory, challenge without words. They met at the pump behind the boarding house, dawn pale and cool. Clara drew water with strong arms, her sleeves rolled. Cole approached without sound, a trick of his, and spoke her presence into being with a low good morning. She did not jump, did not flinch. She turned slow, eyes level, and answered in kind. His gaze traced the scar at her jaw and moved on, respectful or wary, she could not tell. The moment stretched, filled with the creak of the pump handle and the distant low of cattle. Something in his eyes softened, something in hers sharpened. Neither yielded. Words spread like wildfire in dry grass. The woman from nowhere and the man everyone knew. They crossed paths again and again, at the mercantile, near the corrals, on the edge of town where the land opened wide and honest. Each meeting added a layer to the air between them, curiosity laced with caution. Clara learned he was not quick to anger, but when it came it burned clean and final. Cole learned she had lost a husband to a lie and a home to men who smiled too easy. He learned it without her saying a word, by the way she watched exits and kept her back to walls. The day trouble finally showed its teeth. It came wearing the face of a man who thought the world owed him more than it ever promised. He grabbed Clara's arm outside the livery, breath sour with drink, words slurred and ugly. Before she could wrench free, Cole was there, hand firm on the man's shoulder, voice low and deadly calm. The man sneered and spat a threat. Cole did not raise his voice. He simply removed the hand and sent the man on his way, with a look that promised consequences. When it was over, silence fell heavy. Clara's pulse raced, anger and gratitude tangling tight. She faced Cole then, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat of him in the cool afternoon. "I ain't afraid of you," she whispered, the words steady, even as her hands betrayed her, trembling when he reached up, slow and deliberate, and brushed a knuckle along her cheek, not claiming, not taking, just acknowledging the scar and the strength beneath it. The touch sent a shiver through her. She hated and welcomed all at once. The town watched from a distance, sensing the start of something that would not end easy, and as Cole drew his hand back, a promise hung between them, unspoken, heavy as thunder waiting to break after that afternoon by the livery. Red Willow shifted on its axis, not enough for strangers to notice, but plenty for those who lived by listening to small things. Clara felt it when conversations hushed as she passed. when eyes followed her and then slid toward Cole Ransom, like answers written in flesh and bone. She hated the attention, but she hated more the way his touch lingered in her thoughts. Light as it had been, respectful and brief, yet heavy with meaning. She told herself it was nothing, told herself she had crossed worse men and colder nights. But when she lay awake in the boarding house, listening to the walls creak and the wind worry the eaves, it was Cole's eyes she saw in the dark, not the faces she had fled. Cole felt it too, though he would have cut his own tongue out before admitting it aloud. He had lived his life with clear lines, land on one side, enemies on the other. Women kept at a distance because closeness made men sloppy, and sloppy men ended up dead. But Clara Mae Holloway unsettled those lines. She carried grief like a hidden blade, and strength like a loaded rifle. He found himself riding past the boarding house without reason, slowing his horse when he saw her at the pump or hanging laundry, telling himself he was just keeping an eye on things. That Red Willow had enough trouble without adding a stranger to the list. Their conversations stayed brief at first, words traded like careful bets, neither willing to show their full hand. She asked about the valley and the weather and which roads flooded come spring. He answered plainly, never prying, never pushing, which somehow made it harder for her to keep her guard high. One evening she surprised herself by laughing at something he said, a soft sound she hadn't made in months, maybe years, and when it faded, she saw something flicker across his face, wonder mixed with regret. Like a man who finds water in the desert and knows he cannot afford to drink his fill. Trouble had a way of sensing weakness, and it sensed it now. A handful of men rode in from the south, hard eyes and mean reputations. They talked too loud, drank too much, and asked too many questions about land deeds and boundaries. Cole watched them from across the saloon, jaw tight, knowing exactly who had sent them. Knowing this was no random visit, Clara caught the tension in the room and felt a familiar chill crawl up her spine. She had seen this before, the slow circling before a strike. She did not ask Cole what was coming, but she did begin making plans of her own, old habits rising like ghosts. The first shot came at dawn, cracking the quiet like a whip, shattering a window at the ranch house on the edge of town. No one was hurt, but the message rang clear as church bells. Red Willow woke to fear and anger braided tight. Cole rode out with a handful of men, faces set, rifles ready. Clara watched them go from the boarding house porch, heart hammering. She told herself she owed no one here anything, that she could pack her valise and be gone before noon, but her feet stayed rooted. And when the dust settled, she found herself walking toward the sheriff's office instead. By midday, the air buzzed with rumor. Some said Cole would burn the valley to keep it. Others said this was the end of him. Clara listened and learned, piecing together the shape of the conflict. Land once promised, then stolen. Men who believed power made them right. It sounded too much like her own past to ignore. When Cole returned, dust caked to his coat and blood on his sleeve that was not his, he found her waiting, eyes steady, hands clenched at her sides. She did not scold or plead. She simply said she knew what it was like to be hunted for standing your ground. They argued then, voices low but fierce, words sharpened by fear neither wanted to name. Cole told her to leave, told her Red Willow was no place for a woman with her scars. Clara fired back that she was done running, done letting men decide what places she was fit for. The argument ended the way storms sometimes did, not with thunder, but with a sudden, fragile calm. They stood too close again, breaths mingling, the space between them charged and dangerous. He reached out and stopped himself this time, fingers curling into a fist at his side. Restraint etched deep into his face. That night, Clara could not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the past come calling. Remembered her husband's smile and the lie that killed him. Remembered the men who had taken her land with papers and threats. Remembered the fear that had chased her all the way to Red Willow. And she understood then why Cole scared her more than any of it. Because he was not a lie, not a threat made of shadows. He was real, and real things could hurt you deeper than ghosts. Outside, somewhere in the dark, a horse snorted softly, and Clara knew the storm had not passed. It had only begun. The valley did not sleep that night. Even the coyotes kept quiet, as if they knew better than to sing before blood was spilled. Cole rode the fence lines until moonset, counting shadows and weighing odds, every creak of leather and shift of his horse reminding him how thin the line was between holding ground and losing everything. Clara stayed awake too, packing and unpacking the same valise until dawn paled the window, arguing with herself in whispers. She could leave. She should leave. Yet every road out of Red Willow felt like a betrayal she was too tired to make. When the sun finally climbed, red and raw, it found both of them ready in their own stubborn ways. The men from the south came just after noon, dust rolling ahead of them like a warning, rifles across saddles, faces set in practiced cruelty. The town froze, doors closed, curtains twitched. Cole stepped into the street alone at first, coat open, hands loose at his sides. His calm was a challenge all its own. Clara watched from the boarding house porch, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. When words were exchanged, they were brief and useless. Old grievances dressed up as law, greed, wearing the mask of righteousness. The first shot was not Cole's, but he answered it all the same. The street exploded into chaos. Time stretched and shrank in strange ways. Clara found herself moving without thinking, dragging a wounded boy into cover, loading a rifle with hands that shook but did not fail her. Smoke burned her eyes and dust coated her tongue. She saw Cole fall to one knee and surge back up, blood blooming at his shoulder. Rage and fear tangled tight in her chest. When it was over, the street was torn and silent. 2 men lay dead, the others fled hard and fast, taking their lies with them. Red Willow breathed again in shaky gasps. The cost of standing your ground written plain in blood and broken boards. Cole sat on the steps of the saloon while the sheriff rapped his shoulder, pain cutting sharp but clean. He lifted his head when Clara approached, relief flashing through him unguarded. She dropped to her knees in front of him, without caring who watched. Her hands trembled as she touched his face, just as they had before. This time she did not pull them back. "I ain't afraid of you," she whispered again, tears tracking dust down her cheeks. And this time the words were truer than they had ever been, because fear had burned itself out in the fire of choice. They talked in the quiet that followed, voices low, words finally honest. Clara told him everything, the lie that killed her husband, the men who stole her land, the running that had hollowed her out. Cole listened without interrupting, his hand warm and steady over hers. When he spoke, it was of the valley and the fight ahead, of rebuilding fences and trust, of staying because leaving would mean letting the wrong men win. She realized then that this was what she had been searching for without knowing it. Not safety, but a place worth standing for days turned into weeks. Red Willow patched itself together, scars showing but strong. Clara stayed, not because Cole asked her to, but because she chose to. She worked alongside the townsfolk, her laughter slowly returning, her eyes less haunted. Cole healed, though he would always favor that shoulder when the weather turned. They did not rush what grew between them. They let it take root in shared work and quiet evenings, in understanding earned the hard way. One evening, as the sun bled out over the hills, Cole took her hand and led her to the edge of town where the land opened wide and honest. He did not make promises he could not keep. He simply said he would stand with her as long as she stood with him. Clara looked out over the valley, feeling the weight of the past finally loosen its grip, and nodded. The choice, clear and fierce in her chest, long after the dust settled. Folks would talk about the woman who came to Red Willow carrying nothing but scars and defiance, and the man who learned that strength could be shared without being lost. They would say the valley changed after that summer, that it grew quieter, truer, and if you asked Clara, years later, what made her stay, she would smile and tell you she found something worth not being afraid of, and that was enough.